Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me for Real Talk NFT. As you know, I'm your host, Brian. You know my amazing co host, Joe. We have an awesome guest here for you today, somebody I'm so happy to have on the podcast. He's one of the best digital artists out there, Grant Noon. Grant, really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, and thanks so much for having me. I really enjoy your podcast and your YouTube channel, and so it's an honor for me to be here today.
Yeah, hey, the honor's all ours. We were talking a little bit before the show that like I'm just a huge fan of your art. It's always kind of just like really spoke to me. I know you're a big collector of fidenzas and squiggles, and I kind of run in those same paths as well. But before we start talking about all like your art background and everything along those lines, you have one of the most interesting stories of really pretty much anybody in the entire world, I feel like, because as far as I know it, you're a hell of a breakdancer, you're in med school, and like we said, you're one of the top digital artists in the space. Talk to me a little bit about that and how you even juggle all those different roles.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try to be pretty brief with everything. Um, I think, a lot of people bring up like the fact that I'm in medical school. Honestly, the way I see my art and med school are kind of intertwined. I think a lot of the directions I take with my art uh, is intended for a mass audience, right? It's not very esoteric. It's pretty viewer friendly, no matter how, like well tuned you are in art and understanding art. And I think that was intentional because um, a lot of the vision I had for my artwork was mainly like for patients in hospitals, and I think really I wanted to create an atmosphere that was kind of serene and kind of relatable to everyone, and so that's kind of where a lot of the artwork that I created started, and so a lot of it actually has been intertwined over the years, kind of as I progressed throughout school, and throughout my education, but also as an artist. Um, in terms of juggling the two, it's actually not too hard, honestly. I think. Um, it's easier because I'm an artist who works for myself. I think it's different if I was to work in an industry, like a concept artist or working for a company. But honestly, like two very different time horizons. And so it's actually been quite synergistic. One helps with the other. And honestly, I've been able to live a fairly balanced life despite kind of having two different identities.
I love it. And I can somewhat relate. By no means have I ever gone to med school or anything along those lines, but we both are honestly in the NFT and crypto and Web3 world. And probably for over 20 years before I kind of started doing all this fun stuff, I was actually in surgical sales. So covering like vascular and cardiovascular surgeries. And I absolutely know how hectic of a life that is, how early morning hours, and it's just a ton of work. And I've known a lot of people that have gone through med school, and I know how much just overwhelming work you have. I mean, for good reason. Really curious, what specialty are you going into?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about internal medicine right now. I think surgical subspecialties were somewhat I felt detached from them, and you having a previous history and kind of surgical sales and stuff like that, I totally remember seeing a lot of the reps on the floor and
Yeah,
in the ORs,
we're
with all
there.
the different equipments, exactly. But yeah, so internal medicine, and I honestly, I think looking forward, I'm not 100% sure what it is I want to do in terms of that career path. Kind of the world is my oyster. I'm just kind of taking it step by step.
Grant, you're the first artist we've ever had on the pod after 2 years. So I am really excited to have you on here because I want to take a peek inside your brain. We heard a little bit about your inspiration of how you work towards your art to make it serene for the patients. How did you get started in art? How did it become a passion? I heard that you, or correct us if I'm wrong, Brian told me you might have started on on um, on a very simple platform, creating digital art. And yeah, how did that transition happen from art to digital art, or did you just go straight into digital art?
Yeah, so that very very simple platform was PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint, and so
Yeah.
um, I've been an artist my whole life. I remember the first thing I told my parents I wanted to be when I grew up was a
Oh
photographer.
wow,
My mom was an artist, and
nice.
so I had art fairly early in my life. I think it's been just kind of a foundation for me, just like kind of eating and drinking. It's very similar. I feel. I can't really live without art, but I got into digital art probably around 10 years ago
Oh
now at
wow.
this point, basically around the time I started college, university, and I didn't really have any introduction into digital art. And so I was like, okay, I know PowerPoint is something that's free for all students that we get, as a subscription to being a student at the university. And so that was kind of the only tool I knew that where I could create graphics. And so I would take the shapes tools like the squares and the rectangles and triangles, stack them on top of one another and change the colors. And over time, I kind of honestly I mastered that technique, funny enough to say. But moved over to Adobe Illustrator later on. I still illustrate in a very similar fashion where I use individual shapes, I reorient them, and kind of manipulate the shapes and adjust the colors. But it's a very similar technique as when I first started, and so I think that's kind of led me to have a unique approach to my practice and also kind of a unique visual style that might look a little bit different from most artists out there.
Yeah, you nailed it there. It does look different than a lot of digital artists out there. And that's something that always attracted me to your work. And a reason why I know you're going to develop into this, like, you're already huge. I mean, like, you're already huge. I mean, you've been in Sotheby's and Christie's and all that good stuff. But whenever I look at whenever I look at a Grant piece, I absolutely know it's from you, or if it's something that's not directly from you, is absolutely inspired by you. Just the minimalistic approach in the kind of the color palette. It's almost like soothing when I look at it, if that makes any sense. Like, you have like a farm. Oh, a piece you have. I don't think you ever minted it as an NFT. There's a Boston Terrier that's like sitting up on a windowsill looking out. And I used to have a Boston Terrier, and I was like, oh, I was like flying around the one day. This is maybe a year or two ago, and I was like, is this gonna become like an addition? Is this gonna be a one of one? I loved it, everything about it. But when you just look at your pieces, I absolutely know it kind of came from your mind, your brain. How do you classify your style? I guess in artistic terms.
Yeah. So just for clarification, that piece actually was minted in 21.
Ah,
It was minted on Super Rare, and it sold, I think, for 1 ETH at the time, and it hasn't traded hands ever since. The collector, like, he's not as active anymore, but he's definitely a diamond hander, so I don't know what's going to happen with that one. But yeah, no, my style overall, definitely like I dabble in realism, of course, and minimalism, but I've classified my style overall with the word neo-precisionism, and I've written up several blogs about this, kind of on my Medium articles. Also, you might kind of be able to search through them through my Twitter threads, but ultimately it just is so like the word itself, neo, as in the prefix new, precisionism. Precisionism was a movement of art, kind of around exactly almost 100 years ago, 1920s era. And there's a lot of kind of motifs from that era that I really draw from. In addition to that, I think I wanted to continue on the narrative of this art movement, which was really focused on kind of precise geometric angles and shapes as a way to depict the evolving landscape. As you might know, the 1900s were a time of, kind of industrialization and rapid kind of societal growth. I think very similarly, I wanted to apply 21st century techniques, of course, so being a digitally native artist using vector graphics, um, to kind of touch base with kind of the older genres of art that exist and be able to uh, not reinvent, but reimagine kind of those thoughts and those motifs within a 21st century lens, essentially.
Nice, nice. I love your work. I purchased a Life in Japan work, and I'm looking for your first piece on Solana. Me and Brian were actively looking for it before you jumped on the pod. We're like, where is it? It's not on Magic Eden. It's on exchange.art. We're trying to buy it, and we're trying to figure it out. But the first time I heard your name was synonymous with, the famous cow, right? The first, I think it was one of the first CCOs out there.
mhm.
And I saw those headlines everywhere. I'm like, who's this Grant New guy? Why does everyone love this cow? Why are they making derivatives of it? Can you walk us back in time? Was that what kind of, set everything on fire for you? And kind of what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, actually, I will say it never like I don't think it actually helped in terms of sales or anything. I think at by that point I had a bit of a momentum going, and so I would say maybe it helped me kind of push that momentum. But I did have some good momentum going into create minting that piece. So I minted that I think late 21 or early 22, and it was part of my Midwest series. And actually, it was the last piece of the series, one of the last pieces of the series to be minted, and the reason why it took so long was because I was afraid that people wouldn't, it just wouldn't be received very well. I mean, it's a literal cow, and the rest of it is just like 95% of that composition is just a single plain green color, right? And so, but a collector was really interested, and he said he really wanted to purchase it. And so, uh, I remember I minted it, and then all of a sudden, like everyone started doing derivatives. It was
Hmm.
just a really organic movement. And at that point, I knew that I probably should just like take this CC0. I think at that time, and even today, really, like I don't go after people for taking my art or copying it in any way, even if it's not CC0. I think a lot of my art when I first started, I really wanted to just share it with the world without thinking about making money off of it. And so, very early on, I would sell prints, just like to and I would charge just to break even and stuff like that. And so CC0 at the time, really made sense to me to just, allow anyone to take this, whether they're directly copying it and just minting it again, or, kind of reincorporating it into different artworks and then minting it and making money off of it. I was completely happy with, whatever direction anyone took. Um, and yeah, I think definitely taking that CC0 kind of triggered other artists and other, maybe companies, but definitely different entities to take their works CC0 as well. And so I think around that time I had to clarify, like, I'm not saying everyone and everything should be CC0. I'm just saying within the context of this artwork specifically, I'd like to take this one CC0, but CC0 is something that I think everyone should critically think about before they make that decision because it's something that is irreversible, as you guys might know.
Well, tell Moonbirds that. No. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding to any Moonbird listeners or holders. Just having a little fun with the CC0 news there. Well, I mean, the thing I love about you, Grant, is just how genuine and authentic you are. I mean, this is the first time we've really spoken, but it just really, it just seems like you're doing art. I mean, not like a lot of people out there might be doing art for money or just to fill a void. It really seems like you're doing art just because of the love of the art. It's a creative outlet. You have a hectic life, and I'm sure that you're probably doing a lot of your artwork late at night because you have med school during the day and a lot of work, um, just within that entire world. I'm very curious. You have this like really strong collector base. Just people that are just like I'm one of them. Like anytime like you tweet something out or you show a sneak peek, it's just like this rabid collector base. Was that always a goal of yours, or was it just kind of like, hey, I'm going to create art and the collector base will come? And what kind of advice would you have for other artists trying to get in, to kind of get a collector base similar to like how rabid we are for you?
Yeah, I think my goal when I first started digital art, like before Ethereum even existed as a blockchain, like when I first started digital art, I always told myself I wanted to have my art kind of within the same conversations as artists you might see when you go into museums, right? So like old, contemporary artists, fine artists. I think as a digital artist, it was always difficult to find that avenue, especially like I had no exposure to the art world. I was a STEM major, and so like I just didn't know anything about art. But that was always my goal. And once kind of Ethereum, began to pick up in terms of the art side of things, I think the picture for that path uh, is still not clear, but definitely is becoming clearer and clearer as more kind of institutions, bigger names are getting involved. And of course, that's kind of a conversation now that we could have on the side as well. But, I think now the picture is becoming a little bit more clear, and those goals still for me are the same. I think. Um, this is kind of a tangent, but I always tell people like I never want to be in a position where I feel like I need to mint something for the sake of making money, or if I'm strapped for cash or something. I think I've always told myself I'll always mint things and I always create art as a means to find fulfillment, but also kind of get to this goal of being someone who is in a museum and kind of in the conversation with those artists. And so I think people, definitely the collector base has seen that I do my best to price my art kind of in a way that's, I don't know if fair or just is the right word, but something that I think is reasonable, where people like, I guess all this to say that I think I only have one mint where it's below the mint price or exactly at the mint price. I think it always hovers around like high $200, which is right around where it minted for. And besides that, it's everything else has been, two, three at minimum X above the mint price. And so I think that is one thing that people have been fond of. And I think that is one piece of advice I would have for artists. Of course, artists have different goals, right? A lot of people are very monetary driven. And it would be a lie to say I'm not monetary driven as well. I mean, of course, it's undeniable that
Mhm.
I've made some cash in the space, but at the same time, I think giving uh, being aware of kind of how the market is trending, there's ups and downs, there's highs and lows, following and doing best to not kind of fall into a hype cycle. I think there was a time when ordinals were extremely hot. There was times when Soul was extremely hot. There were times when open editions were really hot. And I've done, my Soul drop now, but that took over 2 years in conversation with Exchange Art,
Mm.
because I wanted to see like a good collector base, good art community. I didn't feel the need to rush into anything because ultimately, you notice like there's trends, and then ultimately people kind of get bored, or there's some new shiny object they want to chase. And so the goal ultimately, as for myself as an artist, and I think it's a good kind of tip for other artists, is if you see these trends happening, just ask yourself, like, do you see yourself kind of following the upward trends, but also the downwards trends, once people lose interest later on? And if you see yourself falling into that kind of cycle, then maybe take a step back and see the bigger picture, right? And I think that's one thing. And then, just being genuine. I know you had mentioned that I come off as a genuine person. I think I have a lot of strong opinions, but I don't share them in public. I don't want to make any enemies, but also at the same time, it's not my place to talk about things that might affect other people's livelihoods, or like, people
Mhm.
have very strong opinions about this chain or that chain, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just not my role and it's not my position to have any opinion, to share any opinions like that in such a fickle and turbulent market.
This is a very interesting market, like you mentioned, is very progressive versus the past. I would think artists of the past, like we don't have podcast recordings of Jackson Pollock, I don't think, or Andy Warhol. I mean, access to you is a lot different these days than before. How does that impact you? I know that you have a very calm demeanor. I don't imagine you get rattled by much, by people talking about price or whatnot. I think a lot of the community members that buy your artwork really love your artwork, and rightfully so. But you juggle things so well, like Brian mentioned, you're in Sotheby's, Christie's, you're doing things cross plot blockchains, integrating mechanisms that some people don't really want to take. I know you did a burn with Nifty Gateway. Just think about it. I could name like so many platforms that you're on. Like you're pretty active, more so than people think, because you're such like just talking to you, you're just like a calm state. But yeah, I see like you're like a duck paddling underwater. You have so much going on. And I know this is a loaded question and a lot of thoughts in here, but you even mentioned different blockchains and cycles, and what's your view for digital art moving forward? Like or a vision of what's to come, because there's so much progression that's happening in the space.
Yeah, do you mean more like a tech side or a market side, like a kind of?
Yeah, maybe for yourself.
Yeah, I
Like,
guess.
everyone's on Bitcoin nowadays, right? And there's like a lot of things about Bitcoin that's very intriguing. They have like Epic Sat. Someone just inscribed into an Epic Sat. There's that's just one. I wouldn't call it a progress, but that's like a new, shiny object. And art seems to live forever on Bitcoin versus on, other blockchains. It might not live forever. It might just be a pointer, right? Like thoughts. I mean, I could go on for 1,500 questions there. How much time do we have, guys?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I know we had scheduled for 30, but if the conversation takes us further, then I'm totally down to keep talking. Yeah, I think first off, I think just to address, because you brought it up, the ordinals thing, I think ordinals are very uniquely important, and I have nothing against ordinals. People continue to ask me to drop on that platform or just like any ordinals based platform. I just haven't yet because I don't think it's the right time for myself.
Hmm.
Just because like I have other schedules and other things, but that's really the only reason I haven't done a drop on ordinals. um, but just in terms of the market overall and my art as well, yeah, I guess I do hold most of the time a calm demeanor. It is stressful when you see art, kind of like artworks that you have created, kind of prices going all over the place, up or down, activity going down or up. Um, and yeah, I mean, I do check the prices of my works and the activity, maybe not on a daily basis, but quite frequently. And I'm sure other artists do this as well. Um, I think thinking about things and how things trend, I think there definitely was kind of a mania at the beginning of 21 up until around 22. I think we can all agree. And then things have been a little bit more difficult recently, especially because other chains have become more popular. And so the collector base is spread pretty thin. And
Hmm.
I think creators, maybe some have left, but I think the amount of creators heavily outnumbers the amount of collectors and the amount of liquidity out there. And so I think it's really about trying to, I think, as I had mentioned before, pricing things kind of quote unquote fairly, but at the same time, being aware of uh, where the market is. And so humbling myself, I guess, is one way to say things, maybe pricing things in a primary market that are much lower than they were previously. And honestly, the way art markets work typically outside of digital art is the secondary market is what bolsters an artist's market. And the primary sales typically are not as high as the secondary sales. And so I kind of want to take that concept and try and apply it to my art practice as a digital artist. I know that comes at the cost of sacrificing a bigger paycheck because I'll be pricing lower. But I think it's a good approach that I'm having. But also at the same time, I think it's an experiment. And I think moving forward for everyone in general, the art market in general, uh, I'm talking about the digital art market. It's going to be one big experiment. I think there was definitely a bull, and now there's a bear. And I think moving forward, there's going to be very important works of art, and hopefully I can be included kind of in that conversation. But I think, like, behind you is a squiggle, and I think that's one of those artworks that's going to be very important. So I think there's going to be kind of artworks that are cemented in digital art history that hopefully will transition over to contemporary art history. But for the rest of us, I think it's really about just kind of um, pricing things in a way that makes sense for the markets, continuing on just building as an artist, regardless of the market, and just like digging deeper and finding meaning and trying to convince people why your art is important. Because at the end of the day, there's lots of artworks out there. I think last time I checked on Foundation, there's like, I don't know, like a million artworks, right? And so minted, right? And so I think really it's about finding. Uh, Trying to convince people and convincing yourself on why the art that you create is important and should be important for the future to come.
Yeah, I definitely noticed whenever you did this Solana drop and like I found out about the price, I was like, this seems low for a grant like initially release. And I was like, and I did think that like it's gonna probably get a lot of traction on secondary, it's gonna change a lot of hands, and then finally fall in the hands of your collector base and diamond hand holders like myself. Like once I get that piece, I'm just never selling it. I mean, it's a wrap. I'm just so happy to own that piece. And I did notice that when you made the drop and made the announcement for who could mint, I was like, this is so reasonably priced. It seems like he could be charging 10 times this. So as a collector, we thank you, but hopefully those really start cranking and going on the secondary. Curious going back to it and working with exchange.art and launching on Solana, because for so long, Ethereum mainnet was kind of like, that's where digital art lives. All blue chips are on Ethereum mainnet. I swear, I feel like that was 6 months ago. I woke up one day, and now everyone's talking Ordinals, Solana. But I do feel like you're one of the biggest or the biggest name that's really done an art drop on Solana. Kind of just give me an idea. I know it said 2 years in the making, but give me an idea like why you migrated over to that chain and why Solana compared to, some others out there.
Yeah, I think Solana, I think at the very beginning it was like Ethereum, Counterparty, and then the next one probably to come was Solana. And then after that, I know Cardano was had difficulties in the past with like smart contracts, and so their NFTs were kind of and like Avalanche also had some NFTs that they were doing, and like Harmony and some other kind of L2s, L3s, L2s out there, and L1s. But I picked Solana because I feel like there's a very dedicated collector base, and there's also a group of people, in my opinion, that is very Solana maxi and very Solana oriented.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I don't have any personal opinions about is ETH better, is Sol better, like what is the best L1 or anything like that. Uh, I think as an artist, I think it's important to just go where there's a rich community of artists first and foremost, and then hopefully there's a rich community of collectors as well. Um, and so I think early on when people were bringing up Solana, I was just hesitant because I wasn't sure if it was just a new trend that people were
Yeah.
following and then people would drop it. But I think over the past 2 years, I've noticed that there are like so many people who stand by Solana, whether it's the builders, whether it's the artists, or whether it's the collectors. And I felt like it was the right time to finally hop on board and be part of that conversation. I will say, doing the drop was actually very stressful. Originally it was just going to be a raffle, like drawing for
Yeah.
everyone. Turned out that, it got botted to like, I think within the first day it was like, there were like 5,000 bots that had entered. And so we had to like find a way to onboard some of my ETH collectors onto Sol, but obviously you can't just, copy paste those addresses because it's two different chains. And so then I had to, kind of dig deep and ask around, like, does anyone have a solution to this kind of behind the scenes? And luckily, Deca was working on a tool just to solve this exact thing. And so Deca launched their leaderboards platform, and I was kind of the first person on that leaderboards thing, and they were able to help onboard ETH collectors onto Sol. And I think that's the part that really made me happy about this whole drop was a lot of people were saying this is their first Sol edition or Sol NFT that they've ever bought. And I think being able to bring on a new collector base into a new chain, I think is something that's really important and something that's really uplifting because it helps kind of bridge together different communities. And so it was a stressful, and also like doing the mint and then doing the whitelist, the chain was really congested that week. And
Yeah.
so like I had spent probably at least a few $100s just because like all my transactions would be dropped over and over. So I spent like, I don't know, close to like 12 hours dealing with this. But it finally got through, it finally worked out, and very happy with how things came out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I come from a different side of, I would say, the art collector's world. I came in as an NFT collector because of NBA Top Shot. I saw you did a tweet about it. I still collect NBA Top Shot. I still meet up with NBA Top Shot people every month, which is surprising. So that's how I got into the space. And so when I saw your tweet, that was pretty funny. I was like, we're still here. We're not going anywhere. And I started collecting art because of NFTs. Thankfully so. I'm still figuring out what type of collector I am versus Brian. Brian, he has like a strong, unique taste, and he has a massive NFT art collection. Going through kind of the works that you've done, I'm not going to ask, for you to pick your favorite baby, but, I see a lot of, works that you put out there. Japan being, I think, one of the more famous ones, but I know that your background's from Korea. I'm not sure if you grew up from there. I see that you have a growing up section there. Could you walk us through that? I see California. I'm in California. I apologize. I did not see the inspiration behind each and every single, types of artworks that you've done, but I'm sure there's a similar thread, your background being involved with these works. And what's next? Because it seems like a lot of your inspiration comes from your daily life, right? Like I'm going to Japan in next week, so I'm super excited, to see more of Japan myself personally. So I imagine that's why you're excited about Japan, and just kind of, what other or next thing excites you.
Yeah. So before that, so I made that Top Shots post. I feel like it was just supposed to be a fun post. Honestly, I don't know too much about why people FUD Top Shots at all.
Yeah.
Like I knew there was some FUD early on in like 22, but I never like was into Top Shots. But it was just like supposed to be a lighthearted tweet. Actually, I think they're so cool. I really wish they did come back. And I know this is like a complete tangent, but I am I am like really not like super, but I am, kind of peripherally invested into Pokemon cards. Like not like deeply like monetary from a monetary perspective, but I do follow the
Mm.
market and like all the cards individually and stuff. And so, like seeing Top Shots is just like the coolest thing ever. And so I don't know why there's so much fun around. Hopefully they'll come back. Like to like the mainstream.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of just like my art moving forward, yeah, I take a lot of inspiration just from my personal life. And so, I spent a lot of time growing up in Korea. I am Korean. I spent a lot of time growing up in Korea and Japan. So I wanted to kind of have a reflection of kind of those experiences. I have a series called Midwest, which is kind of my experiences living in the Midwest for the first time. I grew up in California for
Yeah.
the majority of my childhood, which is why I have such a big kind of set of pieces from that series, California. Most of these bodies of work are still ongoing, and so they're just a continuation of how I feel and kind of like if I can remember or recall different memory I've had in the past. A lot of them are fictional representations of my memories, right? And so they're kind of very ambiguous and vague for anyone to kind of relate to. And so I think moving forward, I have a lot of kind of ongoing series that I like to continue on working through. I think just seeing myself as an artist, I'd like to keep these open, at least a couple of these series open for decades. I think
Nice.
it would be interesting to see how um, I approach a certain series as I grow as an artist and I grow as a person. Both kind of metaphorically, but also physiologically, right? And kind of going through different stages of life. And so, yeah, I think if you were to tell me what is a favorite, I think some of the works from my Midwest series are my favorites. And the reason I say that is because a couple of reasons. I think first one is that that style that I create art in today was really solidified through that series, and so that series was kind of the jumping off point for the artwork I create today, and so it kind of has a special, kind of place in my heart. Also, I know you guys had mentioned Christie's and Sotheby's, but one of those artworks got printed, I signed it, and then the NFT alongside the print was auctioned off last year at the post War and Contemporary Art Day sale. I think I was the youngest artist of the entire week of sales there, and the only NFT that was sold. And so it was definitely like a point of pride, but also just like very uplifting moment for me. I think it was very validating because I'm sure you guys have it, and I'm sure every artist has it in this space. We all have a little bit of imposter syndrome every now and then, or at least for myself, I have quite a bit. And so it was very like I guess reaffirming for myself, and so I would say like works from that series hold a very special place in my heart.
It's crazy to me to think that you have imposter syndrome for some reason because of how talented you are in so many ways. How is it how is it being in med school and like having classmates, your contemporaries there, and you're like this digital artist, especially like in internal medicine, it's so analytical. And you're this digital artist, or you're an artist, you're a digital artist that has like, and people are talking Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin. uh, does anybody care, or they're like friends of yours or students that like every day that you're going to school with, they ask you questions about Bitcoin or Ethereum? Are they collectors? Just the two worlds just seem like so polar opposite, but you've embraced them, and just curious about that, how that all meshes together.
Yeah, I try to hold like two identities that are very separate from one another. I don't ever really talk about it. I think, of course, if my colleagues can find me on social media, I don't hide it obviously on social media. My Instagram, I'm pretty public as a just an artist. I don't think I have any references to medicine in there. And then obviously on Twitter, I'm very public, forward facing as an artist. And so if people find me, like my classmates find me on there, then they'll know kind of what I'm into. But I never really talk about it with anyone. Um, if I need to travel for art, you know, I'm either just like personal event that I need to take off for, right? And that's really about it. I never really talk about it, and I think it's for the best. Honestly, less questions the better on my end.
Keep
Well,
those two worlds separate.
yeah, but if I had you as a doctor and I knew how good your artwork was, I was like, oh, I feel safe. This guy's good. I had a
I
question
love it.
about just maybe if you even think about it, that is how crypto, blockchain, Web3, is there any idealistic view for you or wishes that you want for that you see either for your artwork, your community, or some sort of mechanism that you would love to have? You could speak to the devs out there and kind of how it kind of fits in your overall picture, or is it kind of everything's great now and you just want to continue as is in terms of digital art with Web3?
Yeah, I think just from like the tech side of things, it's not even a tech thing. I mean, I guess it is, but just know like finding a way to filter bots. But I think people are doing
Yeah.
it fairly well. I think I know it's tough. I mean, obviously, people are working hard to create bots just as much as people are trying to get rid of them. And so, honestly, I think the bot situation has gotten a lot better from when artists were doing open editions and other types of, kind of um, editions out there. I think from like 2021, 2022, like the botting situation has gotten better. And there's platforms out there that really do a very good job bypassing bots. So obviously now Deca has helped me out with the whitelist, but also like platforms that have been around since the beginning, like Nifty doesn't, I wouldn't say like they're perfect, but they do a they do a really good job with bypassing bots. And so I think the one thing is like the continual like war against bots is the one thing that I think would help out artists, collectors, uh, other projects, regardless of art, right? Like PFPs and just like any token gated things. I think really important for bots to be addressed. Just from an art standpoint, I think the biggest form of imposter syndrome that I have, and kind of going back to what I was talking about, really is that I do feel like within the digital art space, we're all kind of well connected. We know one another, and there's not too much imposter syndrome, I think, that goes around between one another as colleagues. But I think within the overarching art world, I think we still need to find a way to try and bridge new collectors, but also institutions, and just finding a legitimate footing in a space that is much greater than ours, right? The art world is a huge kind of a culture phenomenon that has existed for the past, at least from a modern art standpoint, for the past at least 100 years. It's a multi-billion dollar industry, right? And I think that's an industry that digital art will definitely find a footing in. It just is a matter of how we get there. And I think conversations like the ones we're having today, collectors like yourselves and artists like myself, are going to definitely be part of that conversation. And I think no one's done it before, obviously. This is emerging tech. And so I think it's kind of the route that we create and set for ourselves. But I think that's one big goal that I have for myself. And so hopefully, I can be part of that narrative and kind of pushing the boundaries when it comes to bridging digital art to a greater art community.
The last question I have, I've seen some of your pieces in your own personal portfolio. You have like some killer Fidenzas. I think you have some wall prints, if I remember correctly. I know you're a big squiggle guy. Have you ever speculated in other NFTs like the PFP world, or dare I even say the meme coin craze? Is that something you even like look at, or are you more like art centric and focused?
Yeah, so actually, for clarification, I might have a lot of Fidenzas like on my Deca gallery, but they aren't mine. They're just like as a way to represent kind of my art alongside my contemporaries. Tyler, I think, is a wonderful artist, and so I just want to show people how my art looks like next to Fidenza's. But I think. Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, I just completely got thrown
No,
off.
I was just curious. I know you're a big fan of Fidenzas and Squiggles and generative art and other artists and one of ones. I'm just curious if you've ever speculated, like we're talking Top
Yeah.
Shot or like PFPs or whatever the meta is. The only reason I bring up meme coins is I swear, everybody I talk to and I tell them what I do for a living and what they're like. They want to talk to me about like dog with hat, and I'm like, okay, we're in this meta right now. I'm just curious what your own personal point of view is there.
Yeah, I think I've been very conservative recently with trading, no matter what it is. I think early on, I did a lot of NFT trading. Sorry, not a lot, just a lot for myself.
Yeah,
But compared to most traders, not that much. Yeah, I think I definitely bought several PFPs in the past. I kind of have tuned out a lot of ideas of trading. I think even the little that I did, whether it was NFTs or coins, it just like stressed me out too much. And like
yeah,
if we're talking like how can I balance like medical school or like any academic endeavor and art, like I can balance that way more than I can balance when it comes to any form of trading. Like I can't sleep well at nights. No, if I am invested in something that I think can go to zero overnight, which is very possible in this space.
sure,
And so I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, refreshing my phone on CoinGecko or on OpenSea and seeing what the activity is. It was just like so detrimental to my health.
right,
I told myself the amount of money that I could potentially make at the risk that I am kind of at is just not worth my health or my mental well-being. And so that's really why I haven't done too much of that. I think like, yeah, I think art will always be a speculative asset alongside the rest of Web3. I think a lot of the art world is based on speculation. I think that's just a fact. It's not really an opinion of mine. It's just a
yeah,
well-known fact. Um, And I think having such high, I know people say, your JPEGs are a liquid, but what's really a liquid are like paintings that you can't get rid of, right? And so, with how liquid markets are in kind of the digital space, I think art's always going to be a speculative asset and probably more speculative than physical art. And so I think kind of being in that sector of kind of speculative assets is enough stress for me. I don't need to dive into other things.
Oh, yeah, we want you to stay in your lane, focus on what you want to do. Yeah, definitely. Personally, as well, those things cause more stress than need be. I had a question, last question for me, non Web3 related actually, and I'm just curious about the Korean culture and how you guys are just excellent at everything. I know in Japan there's a saying called kaizen, which is always improving, always be better. In the Chinese culture, I'm Chinese. They're just focused on school. That's it. Academic STEM. But I mean, the Korean culture is fascinating to me, and I'm wondering what it is because you guys have taken over pretty much everything, right? Electronics, cars, music, film, media, art, digital art. Now, like, what is it? Is it what? I wonder what it is taught. Maybe you could point to it or not of where the excellence comes from because I don't see that stopping. I just see it just more and more and more and more every single day.
I think I feel like that's a loaded question, but I do think that Korea, I guess first and foremost, I do feel like having gone to Japan several times and obviously, living part of my life in Korea, there's such a stark difference, even for myself going from Korea to Japan. Japanese culture is like so well structured, it is absolutely insane. And I think it's a little different from Korean culture. I think Korean culture seems like very discipline oriented, but in a different way, where it's almost like I almost get the sense that it's like American culture, where it's almost feels like a little bit, maybe not all the way, but a little bit of like dog eat dog world. where it's you just have to beat out your competitor. I think that's really how what it comes down to. And I feel like I see this a lot in Chinese culture as well, like, just like striving for excellence. I think the from the ground up, the societies are built different. Chinese, Korean, Japanese, other East Asian and Southeast Asian cultures, obviously individually different. But, I just think that uh, there's just this level of striving for excellence and perfect, or I don't know about perfection, but just like being hyper competitive, I guess, is the best way to say things. And I'm sure, you being Chinese, that that's probably something that's a very similar sentiment in Chinese culture of making sure that you're the best. And I think that's what, I think that's undeniably what allows for some of these big Asian economies to be, so prevalent in kind of world economics.
No, great answer. I definitely, appreciate your take on that. And yeah, I think you guys are excellent at so many things. It's super exciting to see. Super exciting.
Grant, we really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. One of my favorite podcasts I've ever recorded. Before we wrap up, I'm going to give you a shout out so everyone in the audience can find who you are and where to find you. When's the next breakdancing competition?
Whenever I have time, they're typically like, they're typically on the weekends and they take like the entire weekend.
Oh, wow.
So, whenever I have time, I'll hop in and out.
I love it. I love it. I've seen a few of your videos and I'm like, this guy's fit. And I know you're a big gym guy. We could talk about that forever. But I was like, this guy, like, you're just like pushing and pulling your own body weight like it's nothing. So I'm sure you've been doing that since you were a kid. But keep up the great work. I know you're super busy. You're crushing med school. You're the best digital artist around and absolutely a great person. So we really appreciate you jumping on. If you want to give a shout out to our audience where they can find you on Twitter or whatever the best path is there.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is Grantyun, GRANTYUN 2, like the number two. And I think, all my links are there, and so that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. It was a wonderful time.